In this presentation, Renard and I are going to be examining and describing the relationships between World War I and literature. We are also going to show how literature written about World War I impacted American society.
So what happened? World War I took place in Europe from 1914 to 1918. No single event led to the cause of this war, but it was a sequence of events leading up to 1914 that caused war to become unavoidable. In short, this war began with Germany wanting to expand their empire, leading for two sides to form. Germany allying with several countries to expand their empire, and Great Britain and Russia allying with other countries to defend their empires. The United States didn't join the war until 1917, but the effects of the war have already been taking place and impacting the nation greatly.
The effects that World War I had on literature were very noticeable. First off, the tone of literature that was being written during and after World War I was more patriotic and sometimes even more gruesome. Literature was also used as a way to help the American society understand what had happened during the war. It allowed people to understand how the war started and how it affected society for years after. Literature also allowed the American public to be able to get a sense of what an American soldier experienced and felt while they were off at war.
During the war, there was a boost in production of literary works, specifically an increase of poetry, novels, dramas, and propaganda. World War I inspired authors, soldiers, nurses, and family members to write about the horrors and losses they experienced through the war. The most effective literary device during World War I was propaganda. Propaganda is the use of words, songs, images, and other devices to sway public perception. Propaganda was mostly put out by the US government to unite the American people and persuade the majority of Americans to support the war effort either by saving food or joining the armed forces. Propaganda is effective because it is able to reach the public easily and it is simple for anyone to understand. Propaganda worked so well during the war that it continued post-war, since this was the first time ever mass media was used in this way. On the screen are a few notable pieces of literature, all having to deal with World War I in some way. Not all pieces of literature directly focused on the horrors of combat. Works such as Her Lamb by Charlotte Perkins Gilman and The Colored Soldier by Langston Hughes focused on the effects of war towards women and African Americans.
In Flanders Fields is a very symbolic poem that was written in 1915 by John McCrae, who served as lieutenant and surgeon during World War I. He was inspired to write the poem after the funeral of his fellow lieutenant. This poem allowed America to feel what soldiers were feeling while they were off at war. Through John McCrae's words, they could feel the pain, the sadness, and the resiliency that many American soldiers experienced while they were at war. The Woodland is another extremely iconic poem written in 1922 that describes T.S. Eliot's vision of society after World War I. This poem is particularly influential because it describes lots of social and emotional collapse as well as sorrow and brokenness that came about after the First World War. The Wasteland gives really great insight to the aftermath of the Great War.
The modern period. Entering the 20th century, America struggled with an economic depression and world wars. These catastrophic events paved the way for the introduction of modernism in the world of literature. Authors during the modern period worked to capture the nature of modern life. Modern works reflected on the confusion and thoughts of Americans, especially during World War I. American works started focusing on the values of life, mortality, hope, and disillusionment. World War I ushered in this new era of thinking, changing life for America and the whole world for generations to come.